What if one day you woke up invisible, not just to others but to yourself? This is the story of Alex Carter, a writer who vanished, but never stopped writing. Alex was a man consumed by words. He lived for stories, breathed for them, and dreamed of creating something unforgettable. But dreams can be dangerous when they take you too far from reality. In January, he left behind his job, his friends, and everything familiar to find solitude, a place where he could focus on his masterpiece. That's how he ended up in a tiny, quiet room at the edge of town. It wasn't much, just a bed, a table, and a chair. The walls were bare, the air thick with silence. To Alex, it felt perfect for a writer at least. For weeks, he worked tirelessly. His pen moved across the pages like a dancer, spinning tales of love, loss, and adventure. He poured his soul into every sentence, every word. For the first time in years, he felt alive. The world outside faded away, leaving only him and his story. But then, things started happening. Strange things. One evening, Alex sat at his desk, lost in thought. Suddenly, he realized he needed coffee. He placed his pen carefully on the table and stepped out to buy some. When he returned, the pen was gone. He searched everywhere. The desk, under papers, even his pockets, but it wasn't there. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered to himself. "Where could it have gone?" Alex shook his head, dismissing it as fatigue. Writers often lose things, don't they? Yet, deep down, unease began to creep in. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the silence grew heavier, almost suffocating. Then, suddenly, his eyes snapped open. Something had woken him, a sound, faint but unmistakable. A voice. A man's voice. "Who's there?" Alex called out, his heart pounding. There was no answer. The room was empty. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. Fear crept into his chest, cold and suffocating. He sat up, straining to hear anything beyond the oppressive quiet. Nothing. Just the sound of his own breathing. The strange occurrences didn't stop. They became more frequent, more unsettling. Books fell off shelves without being touched. Whispers echoed in the dead of night. And then there was the mirror, a warped, antique thing hanging on the wall. At first, Alex liked it. It gave the room character. But one day, as he glanced at his reflection, he froze. It wasn't him staring back. The face in the mirror belonged to someone else, a man with a thick beard and piercing eyes. Alex blinked, shaking his head. When he looked again, his own face stared back. "I'm losing my mind," he whispered. That day, Alex avoided the room entirely. He went for a long walk, trying to clear his head. The streets were bustling with life, people laughing, cars honking, children playing. It reminded him of how isolated he'd become. Yet, despite the noise and activity, he couldn't escape the gnawing feeling that something was wrong. When he returned, the unease lingered. He couldn't ignore it anymore. At night, he stood in front of the mirror again, studying his reflection. His face looked tired, haunted. Then, suddenly, it disappeared. Not blurred or distorted, it simply wasn't there. Panic surged through him. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. And then he saw him. The other man, the one with the beard, was standing at the table, holding Alex's pen. He wrote effortlessly, filling page after page with Alex's handwriting. "You will never leave here," the man said, his voice low and menacing. "You will stay with me." Alex wanted to fight back, to shout, to do something. But he couldn't move. He was trapped, powerless, watching as the other man took over his life. Days turned into weeks. The stranger, Victor, as Alex began to think of him, dominated the room. He wore Alex's clothes, used his voice, and finished his book. Alex became a ghost, unseen and unheard. Victor wasn't just a random figure. He represented everything Alex feared about himself. The doubts, the insecurities, the belief that he wasn't good enough. Alex remembered the countless rejections he'd faced before moving to the room. Critics had torn apart his earlier works, calling them meaningless, shallow. One editor had even said, "You'll never be great." Those words had haunted him, and now Victor embodied them. One morning, Alex watched as Victor typed furiously on the laptop. Lines of text scrolled across the screen, each sentence sharper, more vivid than anything Alex had ever written. Victor laughed a cruel, mocking laugh and said, "See? This is what greatness looks like. You could never achieve this." Alex clenched his fists, anger bubbling inside him. "You're not real," he whispered, though no one could hear him. "You're just a figment of my imagination." But deep down he wasn't sure. Then came the day a friend visited. Alex hoped, prayed, that someone would see him. His old college buddy, Sam, knocked on the door, cheerful as always. Victor greeted him warmly, as if he owned the place. "Wow, dude, growing a beard suits you," Sam exclaimed, clapping Victor on the back. Alex's stomach churned. "Sam, it's me," he shouted, running toward his friend. But Sam walked right through him, oblivious. They sat down to chat, Sam complimenting Victor on the progress of the book. "Man, I knew you had it in you," Sam said, grinning. "This is gonna be huge." Alex felt his heart shatter. Even his closest friend couldn't see him anymore. Despair washed over him. He slumped against the wall, tears streaming down his face. How could this happen? How could he fade away so completely? But amidst the hopelessness, a spark of determination ignited within him. If Victor could write, so could he. If Victor could exist in the world, so could Alex. Late at night, when Victor slept, Alex crept to the desk. He picked up a spare notebook hidden beneath a pile of papers. With trembling hands, he began to write. Each stroke of the pen felt like reclaiming a piece of himself. He wrote about his fears, his struggles, his journey into madness. He wrote about Victor, the embodiment of his darkest thoughts. And he wrote about his resolve to fight back, to reclaim his identity. "This is my story," he whispered to himself, "not his." As dawn broke, Alex continued writing. Victor stirred in his sleep, muttering angrily. But Alex didn't care. For the first time in weeks, he felt alive again. Now, Alex tells his story to whoever will listen. He writes these words in secret, hoping someone will understand. Because, while Victor may have taken his room, his face, and his voice, there's one thing he can't take away: Alex's ability to write. And so, he writes. Because this is his story.